We know the Orioles have a lot of players they could trade away at this year's deadline, but do they hold the best of those players? Where do they stack up amongst the other available guys around the league? I'll break that down coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're going to, of course, talk about another Orioles loss as they fell 6-3 to the Cleveland Guardians on Tuesday night. We'll talk about a so-so start from Brennan Young and a really big day for Mayo, but we will also talk about the Orioles guys that could be traded at next Thursday's deadline, specifically comparing them to the other players at their positions on other teams who could also be dealt. Because it's not just about do you have good tradable players, which the Orioles do have going into sellers. It's about how do they compare? Because if you hold the best player at a certain position, you can end up getting a whole lot more. And that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So we'll start by talking about an Orioles loss. Final score from Cleveland on Tuesday night is the Guardians 6 and the Orioles 3, as Cleveland has taken the first two in this 4-game set, as they have, after kind of crumbling a couple weeks ago with a 10-game losing streak, they get themselves back to 500 with that win. The Orioles fall to 44-56 through 100 games. They have hit the 100-game mark with just 44 victories, not exactly where they wanted to be. Sitting here on July 23rd, close to 10 games out of a wild card spot and being definite sellers at the deadline. But I'm going to start with a recap of that loss, beginning with what went right for the Orioles on Tuesday night. And that was, Brennan Young got another start at least and was kind of okay. I mean, he once again had command issues. He wasn't super sharp. He's posted so far a 7.34 ERA in 7 big league starts over a couple of different stints up in the majors this season, but he's working through it, right? And every start that Young goes out there and doesn't blow up and get run off the field at least gives him a little bit more confidence for the next time he goes out there. And, with Young's pitch mix, he's been throwing both a splitter and a changeup. He always had the good changeup, but he added the splitter this offseason. He'd been throwing them kind of fairly equally in terms of usage, but on Tuesday night, he threw 18 splitters and threw just 3 changeups, and it's been evident the splitter is the better of the two pitches, so you like to see Young kind of leaning on that more. And it's tough, right? This Cleveland team doesn't have a lot of right-handed hitters. There's a lot of switch hitters on this team, but it was all 9 left-handed batters in there against Young. Same thing against Tomoyuki Sugano on Monday night. So he's got to go to that splitter as much as he can. He can't get the good matchups against the right-handed bats, and that is tough despite a struggling Guardians offense. But for Brennan Young, again, it wasn't great. It was 4 1/3, 3 runs, 4 hits, 3 Ks, 3 walks, and a homer on 73 pitches. Only 5 hard hit balls against him, which isn't too bad. But you look at another start, and you see Brennan Young, and he's 26 years old, and I think there's a Dean Kramer type ceiling here once he gets his feet under him. I understand it hasn't been great, but it's been 7 big league starts. He debuted earlier this year. There is still plenty of time for Brennan Young. Now, he debuted a little bit older. He is already 26 years old. That's certainly a factor in this process, but the Orioles have plenty of team control. And quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of innings to be had by Brennan Young down the stretch this year. So I want him to continue to get these chances and continue to try and figure things out and see if at the very least, hey, can he be a part of this Orioles rotation next year? Or will he be, one of their main depth starters maybe that begins the year in AAA, but they can at least count on him when they need him at some point next year. They got to use the final 2 months to figure those things out. Now, there is a solid chance that Young actually does get optioned back down to AAA Norfolk today, because Tony Mansolino did announce before Tuesday's game that Zack Efflin is ready to come off the injured list with his back issue. He made 2 rehab starts, and Efflin is going to be activated today and will start tonight's game in Cleveland. And more than likely, Brennan Young will go down to AAA to make roster room for him. Now, the Orioles do have a doubleheader coming up on Tuesday against the Blue Jays. They're probably going to need Brennan Young for that one, and they will be eligible to call him back up just to start the game of the doubleheader. And then eventually, once we get past the deadline, if the Orioles move Morton or Efflin or potentially both at the deadline, a rotation spot's going to reopen back up for Brennan Young to come back up here. Even if only one of them is traded, I think Young would kind of be that next guy they go to, just as he already has gotten the 7 starts and been in the rotation for a chunk of time this year. And I want to see him get those chances down the stretch. Now, it is going to depend on, hey, what do the Orioles get back in these trades, right? What if they get a big league ready starting pitcher back in one of those deals? Do they insert him into the rotation instead of Brennan Young? That's a possibility. But Young's going to get some more chances, and I want to see him continue to develop with the stakes fairly low through the rest of this season. Now, what went wrong on Tuesday? Well, it's kind of the Orioles' current catching situation. Now, Alex Jackson, who did homer on Sunday in Tampa Bay and then started again on Monday night, he's flashed a little bit recently, but Jacob Stallings, who got the start on Tuesday, just not very good. And you really don't expect much from Jacob Stallings, right? He's a 35-year-old who is hitting 143 and was released by the worst team in baseball, the Colorado Rockies, earlier this season. Now it stinks that he's somehow been worse with the Orioles. He's now 3 for 28 as an Oriole. That's a 107 batting average. He has that one big hit. It was the big, add-on 2-run double in extra innings in Atlanta. That's really the one big swing he's taken in an Oriole uniform. But that's what happens, right? When you have 4 catchers on the injured list, you're scraping at the bottom of the barrel, and that's how you end up with Jacob Stallings and Alex Jackson as your 2 catchers. But Stallings really did have 2 just tough ABs for the Orioles on Tuesday. His first at-bat in the third, Kobe Mayo has led off the inning with a walk, and Stallings erases that with a double play. And then the big one was in the 5th. The Orioles were down 2-0, but they were getting to the lefty Joey Cantillo, the Guardian starter, on Tuesday night. And Cantillo was kind of starting to lose it in that 5th inning. The Orioles began to rally against him. They got an Arias single. They got a Cowser single. Mayo worked a long at-bat and drew a walk to load the bases with nobody out. And Stallings comes up, and you're just thinking, just don't ground into a double play. Even if you strike out, get us to Holiday Westberg with the bases loaded. We can tie this game. Just don't ground into a double play. And Stallings runs the count 3-1. Borderline pitch. He takes a called strike for 3-2. And then he does ground into a double play. Grounds the ball back up the middle. Guardians do a good job to turn it. Of course, the run does come home to score to make it a 2-1 game, but he doesn't get the RBI, and Cantillo ends up getting out of the inning and maintaining that 2-1 Cleveland lead. But that ball he hit back up the middle was hit hard, but it kind of bounced off the mound, and it was fielded deep in the hole. Like, most players are able to beat that ball out at first base and have it just be an RBI fielder's choice, and you're still in business in the inning. But by StatCast sprint speed, there are 511 players in the big leagues this year who have played enough to qualify for the StatCast sprint speed leaderboard. Jacob Stallings is 510th on that list. Only Martin Maldonado has been slower than Jacob Stallings by sprint speed this season, and it certainly showed it. Yeah, it's just a tough spot. Like, Ryan O'Hearn did pinch hit for him later in the game, got a single, then Alex Jackson came in, of course, popped out in the 9th inning. The good news around this, though, is that Adley Rutman should be back soon. Adley played in his first rehab game in AAA Norfolk on Tuesday, went 1 for 3 with a double and a walk, worked as the designated hitter and hit the ball hard. He's been out since June 21st with a left oblique strain, but Tony Mansolino said on Tuesday that if all goes well, Adley could return for the Orioles series this weekend against the Rockies, which is very exciting. They're definitely going to want him to probably catch a full game in Norfolk before he does that. So hopefully either Wednesday or Thursday, he'll catch a full game in AAA, and at best, maybe he's ready by Friday to rejoin the Orioles. That would be nice to see, because it's been real rough for a while here with the Orioles catchers. And the shout out from Tuesday's loss, the shout out goes to Kobe Mayo. There's been a lot of talk about Kobe Mayo really not playing much lately. Like, he's been on the MLB roster after getting some run in June and kind of finally starting to look like a big league hitter, right? He was still below average, still a 91 WRC plus in 61 plate appearances in the month of June, but he was finally not an automatic out and was finally somewhat holding his own. But so far in July, entering Tuesday, he played in just 5 games and had just 11 plate appearances without a hit in any of those 11. And some of that is because Tyler O'Neill had been out for so long. He was activated off the injured list on July 4th, and at this point with ONeal just struggling so much with the injuries, you got to play him as much as you can to see if he can find it, get into a groove, maybe up his value to either get traded or opt out. Like, you got to put him in the lineup. And some of it that the Orioles had faced only 3 left-handed starting pitchers in their first 15 games in the month of July. And that is obviously the better spot at this point to get Mayo into the lineup because you still have all-star Ryan O'Hearn on your roster at first base. But even then, Mayo only started one of those 3 games against lefties. Arias started another one. Neither of them started in the other game. And you really thought with Ryan Mountcastle on the injured list and ONeal out, Mayo coming up would kind of play that Mountcastle role, but he really hasn't. He's played much less. Now, he did get the start against the left-hander Cantillo on Tuesday, and actually Tyler O'Neill was surprisingly on the bench for that one. What does Mayo do? He draws 3 walks in his first 3 plate appearances, and then singles in the 9th inning off Emmanuel Clase. How about a 4 times reaching base in this one? Mayo only had 10 walks in 45 big league games coming into Tuesday, and he gets a career-high 3 on Tuesday night. His only other multi-walk game was August 2nd, 2024, in this ballpark in Cleveland. If you remember back, it was Mayo's major league debut about a year ago when he walked twice in his debut. That's the only other time he's had multiple walks in a game, and he's just the 3rd Oriole to do it this year, have a 3-walk game. Gunnar and Adley have each done it once this season, but both of them also got out at least once in their game. So Mayo is the first Oriole this year to walk at least 3 times and reach base in every plate appearance in a game. And his 2-out walk in the 7th inning was the biggest one. It kind of got a rally going for the Orioles. They were down 5-2, 2 outs, nobody on. Mayo walks, then O'Hearn singles as a pinch hitter. Then Jackson Holliday follows up with an RBI single to make it a 5-3 game. And, who knows what will happen with Ryan Mountcastle supposed to go on a rehab assignment at some point this week. He's eligible to come off the injury list by July 30th. It'll probably be more like early August that he's back. But if Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano and maybe even Cedric Mullins are dealt at the deadline, I just hope the Orioles find a way to show us a lot more Kobe Mayo in the lineup in the final 2 months. A, he deserves it, and B, they need to give him some serious run to see what he can do for this team moving forward. And there was also a roster move Tuesday. Like, the Orioles called up Dylan Carlson and optioned Luis Vasquez back down to AAA. Vasquez has kind of been, chilling on the bench as the utility infielder for the O's, and they swap him out with Carlson, an outfielder who spent a lot of time on the roster this year but was in AAA. And you combine that with the fact that Tyler O'Neill, even despite his struggles, has always mashed lefties and did not play against a lefty on Tuesday. Makes you think, like, who knows? They get an extra outfielder up here and O'Neill doesn't play against the lefty. Is O'Neill dealing with stuff again? And yes, because literally as I'm recording, this was just posted by the Orioles beat. Brennan Mortensen, Matt Wayrich, Annie Kuska, just all posting this from Tony Mansolino. Mansolino said Tyler O'Neill was out on Tuesday with, quote, general soreness, and the Orioles were, quote, staying away from him tonight, which is why they called up Carlson. So maybe more openings for Mayo there if O'Neill is just still dealing with stuff. What a disaster his season has been so far, and what a disaster it's been lately for the Orioles. They have now lost 4 of 5 coming out of the All-Star break, and they have lost 6 of 7 overall to cement themselves as sellers who are not climbing out of this hole. And so that's where a lot of our content is right now. We are 8 days away from the trade deadline. We are previewing that deadline and what the Orioles can do. And they have a lot of tradable players. But how do those guys stack up against the other available guys at the deadline around the league? We'll get to that starting with the pitchers coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And for me, the best part is, I'm sharing my finances with someone now, and Monarch helps us just stay on the same page. And the app is super easy. Everything's there, so you can just manage your money day to day and not have to go anywhere else. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So the Orioles lost again to the Guardians on Tuesday night, falling to 44-56 on the season. They are sellers, and we know that. Now, I still don't think, and the Orioles have said as much, they're not really going to trade off a lot of the controllable pieces, even after making the Brian Baker move a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be the rental guys, the guys who are approaching free agency, guys who the Orioles probably aren't, in most cases, bringing back next year anyway. You're out of it for this year. The smart move is to get something back for them to help you in the future, and hopefully target guys that are going to help you win again, hopefully, next year in 2026. But the other big part about being a seller at the deadline, it's not just do you have talent. That's the biggest part of it. If you have talented players to trade away, you can do well at the deadline as a seller. But the other big variable is, how do those tradable players stack up against the other available guys around the majors? Because say you have a great shortstop that you're trading one year. The Orioles, they're not trading Gunnar Henderson, but say you're a team with a really good shortstop you're going to trade. If nobody else is trading shortstops, you could really clean up if a team needs a shortstop. If there's 5 other teams who are in a position to trade their shortstop, the value for your guy is not going to be as high because there's just going to be other options out there. That's when it becomes important to say, okay, do I have the best shortstop out of those 5? And if I do, I can still collect some value. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. The Orioles have plenty of tradable guys, but where do they stack up? Where do they rank? So let's start with the pitchers that the Orioles are most likely going to deal and begin with the rental starting pitchers. The 3 of them that the Orioles have who could potentially get traded are Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano, and Zack Efflin. Now, I feel at this point, even after a rough start over the weekend, Charlie Morton is definitely getting traded. Buster Olney of ESPN reported on Tuesday that multiple teams are already showing interest and checking in with the Orioles about Morton, who's been really, really good over the past 2 months or so. For Zack Efflin, he's going to start tonight, and he'll then line up to have, if he doesn't get traded before then, 1 further start before the deadline. So 2 starts off injury before the deadline. It's been a disaster this year with the lat and back issues, but if he looks good and healthy and these 2 starts, he's going to be traded probably too. And then for Sugano, I guess if a team really wants him, but man, has he looked rough lately. I don't really see a team wanting him, so he probably sticks with the Orioles, but the Orioles are at least going to try with Sugano and see if anyone would give them anything for him. So I made a list of the 17 most likely rental starting pitchers that could be traded around the league. That includes Morton, Sugano, and Efflin. If you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But also, you can see that list of rental starting pitchers right here. They are sorted by their ERA. This was entering play on Monday, which is when I kind of did all my research. So some of these guys may have started on either Monday or Tuesday night, which is going to change their stats a little bit. But this was entering play on Monday. You can see, some of the big names, right? Merrill Kelly and Zac Gallen of Arizona. You've got, guys like Tyler Anderson, Zach Littell of the Rays could be on the move. You've got Mike Elias and Eric Fetty out in St. Louis. Those are the kind of guys who are going to be moved at this deadline. But I put together 17 of them that seem the most likely. The first thing that stands out is Morton is 15th and Efflin is 17th in ERA. That's not great. And Sugano is quickly he's 6th right now, but he's quickly moving down that board as his starts get worse and worse. So let's talk about where does Morton shine among this list. And if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, I'm going to flip it over here to another chart that I have here. This is the full stat chart. Now this is, you got to maybe squint a little bit to see this one, but this is the full stat chart. This includes all of the rental starting pitchers who I think could be available. It's got their ERAs, their FIPS, their xFIP, strikeout rate, walk rate, barrel percentage, hard hit rate, their stuff plus numbers, their true stuff that's thrown out there, the innings that they've thrown, the amount of starts they've made for their teams, everything I like to look at when evaluating guys you're potentially trading for or trading away. So where does Morton shine? First and foremost, Charlie Morton is number 1 among all 17 of these starting pitchers in stuff plus. He's got a 101 stuff plus this year. No one else cracks higher than 97 on the season. Now, 101 is nothing truly elite, but for a 41-year-old starting pitcher, that's pretty good, especially surrounded by his younger peers and is throwing the ball better. If you're looking for a guy who's got that premium stuff, Morton's got it. He's also 3rd in strikeout rate. He's got the 3rd lowest barrel rate on this list. He's 4th in ERA. and third in FIP and second in XFIP since May 10th. That's when like his really good run has begun. He's been one of the better pitchers in this group. And I think what's good for Morton when he has that stuff number, combined with the fact that he's got more postseason experience than any of the guys on this list as well. When you have a guy with that kind of stuff who's pitched out of the bullpen this year, he's pitched out of the bullpen to success in the postseason before. He's a guy who you could trade for. He's your number 5 starter down the stretch, and then you could put him in the pen for the playoffs and still trust him in some roles there. That's why I think teams are going to want Charlie Morton. Now for Sugano, he does have the second lowest hard hit rate on this list. He's got the third lowest walk rate. However, he's given up a lot of barrels. He doesn't strike anybody out. It's not very great. He's got a bad FIP. I really don't think anyone wants Sugano. I think we can just kind of push past him. And then there is Efflin. Now, Zack Efflin right now is dead last with a 5.95 ERA on this list. However, he's got the second lowest walk rate. He's got a sub 40% hard hit rate, which is good to see. His XFIP, which is fielding independent pitching, but the expected, which also includes normalizing your fly ball rate. Basically, this is what, if everything else were turned to the normal dials, what should your ERA be? His XFIP is a 1.5 lower than his FIP and his ERA because he's been hurt so badly by the home run ball this year. And some of that is just bad pitching. Some of that is bad luck as well. He's also dealt with the multiple back issues. He's a wild card here. The O's are going to try and deal him, though, if they can, I would think. So where would I rank these starting pitchers? And please let me know. Let me know right here in the Locked On Orioles YouTube comments. Where would you rank Efflin, Morton, Sugano among these 17 guys who could be traded? I think, honestly, I would put Charlie Morton third. I think Zack Littell and Merrill Kelly, Littell of the Rays and Kelly of the D-backs, would be the two above them. Now, those two guys are not guaranteed to be dealt. I think Morton's guaranteed to be dealt. The D-backs are kind of in it. The Rays are in it. They're just a team who will kind of buy and sell at the same time. So Morton's kind of the number one guy of the guys that will definitely try to be dealt. Morton's kind of number one on the list. Obviously, there are guys like Zac Gallen in there, but he's having a really, really down season. Third for Morton is a good spot to be in, right? Like Littell and Kelly have just been way better. They both have, ERAs around 3. They've just been much better than Morton all year. And I know that Adrian Hauser's up there, right? He's got a 1.89 ERA with the White Sox, but it's also kind of a mirage with low K rates and high hard hit rates. And he's been bad like the past 3 seasons. This is coming out of nowhere. And it's only 12 starts for Hauser. I don't know if I trust him over Charlie Morton at this point. And Morton's got that swing and miss stuff and the playoff experience that just a lot of guys on this list don't have, and puts him higher up on teams' lists. For Efflin, I think I'd put him in the middle of the pack, right? Like the ERA being the worst is tough. A healthy Efflin is top 5. But who knows with these injuries? Like last year's version of Zack Efflin maybe tops this list, you could argue. Like I would argue he was the best pitcher traded at last year's deadline. The Orioles made a great deal to get him, but it's been downhill this season. And, he's around the guys like Chris Paddock and Cal Quantrill and Mike Soroka that are on this list. But Efflin's track record is so much better than all 3 of those guys that I think teams would value that over those 3, which allows him to get to the middle of the pack. But because it's been so bad with the injuries, that's why you can't really put him near the top either. And then Sugano, again, I don't think anyone's going to want Sugano. How about the rental relievers, though? How about the rental relievers? Let's reset it here on the YouTube channel. The Orioles have 3 quote-unquote rental relievers. They've got 2 true rentals. That's Seranthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto. And then they've got Andrew Kittredge, who does have a $9 million team option for 2026. So not a true rental, but could be treated like that if a team just declines his option, and is a veteran reliever as well. This wasn't on purpose. It just happened to be that there were also exactly 17 rental relievers that I thought were likely to be traded. So if you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, this is those list of potential rental relievers to be dealt. And again, just like with the starters, I'm not including the guys who aren't rentals. So I'm not including any guys who have, 2 or more years of team control. Those are in different categories. They cost a lot more. We're just looking at those rental types who are going to be free agents after this year, and teams are basically getting just 2 months plus of these players. So here are the 17 rental relievers ranked by ERA. Our old friend Danny Coulombe up there at number 1 with a .65 ERA in 27 2/3 innings. Soto, Dominguez, Kittredge, 10th, 11th, and 12th in ERA on this list of 17. But you got to look deeper. Let's start with, where does Dominguez really shine? Well, first of all, he is 3rd in stuff plus on this list. Only Ryan Helsley, who been a little shaky this year, but's been one of the most dominant closers in baseball for the Cardinals for the past 3 or 4 years. And then Paul Sewald, who's actually on the injured list right now, so not even sure he'll be traded. So really you could push Dominguez up to number 2 in terms of pure stuff. And teams, even more than with starters, with relievers, are looking for guys with that good, pure stuff. And for Dominguez, his 34% hard hit rate allowed is the 4th lowest on this list. He has the best strikeout rate. 31.3% strikeout rate for Dominguez this year is the best on this list. He's got the 2nd highest fastball velocity. He's got good stuff. He also does have the highest walk rate on this list at right around 14%. So that's not great, but the high strikeout rate is something you want. Dominguez has playoff experience with the Phillies and Orioles. He has closing experience with the Phillies and Orioles. He's added a good new pitch in this splitter, which now allows him to get lefties out so he can go through a lineup facing right-handed and left-handed hitters. He's kind of the whole package for a non-closer reliever that you want to go get at the trade deadline. How about Gregory Soto? Where does he shine? Well, first of all, he's tied with Seranthony Dominguez for a 113 stuff plus, right up there at the top of that list, but from the left side. He's got the 4th lowest barrel rate. He's 4th in fastball velo. He's got a low home run rate. And he also, you could argue, is the best left-handed reliever among the rentals who are on the board. He's 1st in stuff plus among the lefties, 1st in fastball velo, 2nd in strikeout percentage. The other lefties, it's Danny Coulombe, who's been great this year, and then it's Jalen Beeks, Hobie Milliner, and Caleb Ferguson are the other lefties I have on this list. And as you can see here on Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, I'm going to pull up kind of the full list with all the stats for the rental relief pitchers that I have on this list. And for Coulombe, yeah, he's been great, but the stuff kind of tops out, and he's had some elbow and forearm issues. They popped up with the Orioles last year. They popped up again at times with the Twins this year. I'd probably still take Coulombe over Soto right now with how good he's been the past couple of years, but you could see a team preferring Soto just because the ceiling is higher, because the stuff he has, the closing experience, the playoff experience. It's a fire-breathing left-hander. And the other guys are kind of crafty, Ferguson and Milner and Beeks. And they have, Milner and Coulombe have better numbers, but they're, soft tossing 89-mile-per-hour lefty in Coulombe and a submarine sidearm guy in Milner. They just can't touch Soto's stuff and the potential upside when he gets hot. And then for Kittredge, he's kind of middle of the pack here. Just kind of a solid middle reliever that I think it's more than likely the Orioles just kind of hold on to Kittredge and bring him back next year. So where would I rank them? Again, Kittredge kind of in the middle. I'd argue Dominguez is 3rd on this list. I would definitely say that Ryan Helsley and then Rays closer Pete Fairbanks, if he is traded, are clearly both above Dominguez. But I'd put Dominguez above these other guys on the list. The Shelby Millers, the Kyle Finnegans, the Chris Martins, the Raciel Iglesiases, Luke Jacksons of the world that are on this list, Sean Armstrongs. Like, I would put Dominguez number 3, and for the non-closers, because I put closers in Helsley and Fairbanks ahead of him, you could argue that Dominguez is the number 1 non-closer reliever that could be dealt among the rentals at this year's deadline. And that's another reason why the Orioles kind of hold the cards, and same with Soto, right? Being one of the best lefties that is out there, worse than number 2 lefty without the injury issues. The Orioles have some guys at the top of this list on the pitching side. Again, maybe the 3rd best rental starter and probably 2 of the best 4 rental relievers. Like, that's a good spot to be in. But that's just the pitchers. There's also hitters that the Orioles could trade. Where do the likes of O'Hearn and Laureano and Mullen stack up? We'll get to that to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency, like a burst pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? No, you called the next one. That's why having a reliable business line is so important, and that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the number 1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. I think the best part of OpenPhone is your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. There's no more of that, hey, who's handling this one? And OpenPhone is offering Locked On Orioles listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonmlb. That's openphone.com/lockedonmlb. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. That's at OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. So we took a look at the pitchers the Orioles could be trading at the deadline and where they stack up. Now we move on to the hitters to finish off this episode, focusing on the rental hitters, but am including guys like Ramon Laureano. Again, Laureano does have a $6.5 million team option for 2026, so he's not a true rental. But again, a team could cut him loose and make him a rental after the season. But it also includes Cedric Mullins and Ryan O'Hearn. And I found a list of about 20 rental hitters that could be traded. These are guys of all different positions. So you can break it down further into positions, but there's just not enough rental hitters to break them all down into positions. So I went with more of just all the guys that are up there. And again, if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, this is the rental bats that I think are available, the 20 of them ranked by WRC+. You can see right there, Eugenio Suarez has been an absolute tear for the D-backs. They're kind of right in the middle now with about a week left. Do we buy? Do we sell? But he's going to be by far the number one bat available via the rentals if they do sell. But look at number 2 and 3 on the list. Number 2 is Ramon Laureano, and number 3 is Ryan O'Hearn. So once again, the Orioles are in a pretty good spot here. Going to move it over to the kind of full stats of all these rental bats. All these stats are via Fangraphs and their player pages and leaders pages, so shout out to Fangraphs for that. But let's start with Ramon Laureano. Where does he shine here? Where he's 3rd in WRC+, entering Monday. That's great. 4th in batting average, 2nd in slugging, 4th in WAR, 7th in hard hit percentage. And he's 1st in WRC+ among the guys who are truly outfielders, right? Like Suarez doesn't play the outfield at all. And then O'Hearn right around him, like, yeah, he can play a little corner outfield if you need him to, but Laureano's a true outfielder. O'Hearn's more of a true first baseman who can play the outfield. So if you want a true outfielder, Laureano's been the best hitter this season. And although he hasn't played center field this year, I think he can still do it. Like, you totally trust him in right field and left field, and he could play center if you needed to. And he's been more of a reverse platoon guy this year, although he did homer off a lefty with a solo shot on Tuesday night, back-to-back days with a home run for Laureano back in his old stomping grounds in Cleveland. But we know he can hit lefties. He's done it, and he's done it in his career, but he's hitting righties much better this year, which even continues to make him more valuable. And again, that cheap $6.5 million team option makes him even more valuable, obviously, than some of these rentals, but just in general when you're looking at Laureano's trade value. Now, for Mullins, where does he shine? It's a little bit different. I would say what makes him stick out is he's really the only everyday center fielder among these 20 players. Like, Harrison Bader plays a chunk of center field. He can definitely play center field for you every day if you need to, but he's only played 28 games there this season, been more of a left fielder for the Twins. You got guys like Lane Thomas who have played a little center field the past couple of years. You know, other than that, I mean, Willie Castro's played maybe a touch of center field. He's kind of a super utility guy. But otherwise, like, Mullins is the true center fielder. You know, Austin Slater's played a little bit of it as well, but Mullins is the true center fielder who is out there. And there's some questions about Mullins' defense, right? He's at +2 outs above average, -2 fielding run value. People aren't impressed by the underlying stats, but they're still a little shaky for defense. And the eye test still tells you Mullins is a really good everyday defensive center fielder. And I think all 30 teams would trust him to be their center fielder out there with his glove. He also leads this group with 14 stolen bases. He's got the 5th best walk rate, but he hasn't been very good. He was incredible in April. He's got a 59 WRC+ since May 1st. That is dead last among the 20 hitters in this group, so you don't love that for Cedric Mullins. Where does O'Hearn shine among this group? Well, as I mentioned, he's 3rd in WRC+ behind Suarez and Laureano. He's also 2nd in batting average, 1st in on-base percentage, 2nd in walk rate. He's got a low strikeout rate. He's 4th in hard hit rate. Really, O'Hearn's main competitor is Josh Naylor of the Arizona Diamondbacks, a guy who's, you know, been a little bit worse across the board offensively. Naylor's hit for a higher average this year, but everything else O'Hearn has done a better job of than Naylor at the plate. They're both rental bats who are mostly confined to first base and DH, who are left-handed hitters. O'Hearn gives you a little more flexibility because he can play a little bit of outfield if you need him to. Naylor absolutely should not move off of first base. Naylor's been better lately, but O'Hearn's had a better overall season. Naylor has a better, longer track record, but O'Hearn's right there with him. If you're just looking at his last 3 years in Baltimore, like, it's really interesting to think about what teams would prefer Naylor versus O'Hearn. I think slight edge to O'Hearn because he's also gotten better defensively at first base, and Naylor's pretty good over there. But also, like, the D-backs might not trade Josh Naylor, right? Again, they could be in it. If the Diamondbacks just decide to not become sellers and do something else because they think they're in it, The Orioles hold all the cards here. Like, where do they rank? Laureano's the best rental outfielder on the market. I think the Orioles can capitalize right there. Like, Willie Castro, Harrison Bader having good seasons. Laureano's been better. O'Hearn's the second best cornerback. Eugenio Suarez is number one, but I would take O'Hearn over Naylor. And Suarez and Naylor are both on the Diamondbacks. They're like 3 games out of the wild card. Maybe they don't sell. If they don't sell, Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano might be the best 2 rental hitters available. Like, yes, Brandon Lau might be on this list, but he just got injured and put on the IL, so the Rays might just keep him. And then Marcelo Zuna has the track record, but he's still having a good year, but he's having a down year in Atlanta, and he can't play the field at all, so that lessens his value. You have to shoehorn him into just DH, whereas Laureano and O'Hearn can play the field. Like, quite literally, the Orioles right now, if you're an O's fan, over the next week, you should be cheering for the Arizona Diamondbacks to win every single game. Because if they do, that takes Eugenio Suarez and Josh Naylor, 2 of the top 5 hitters on the market, off the board. It would also take potentially Zack Gallen and Merrill Kelly. You could argue 2 of the top 5 starting pitchers as rentals off the board. If the D-backs are not true sellers, the Orioles hold the cards here. Like, even if, because Mullins is tricky, because, he's a true center fielder, Bader's hitting better, Castro's had a better season. I don't really know where Mullins stacks up. It's kind of tough to find his trade value. Even if they can't deal Mullins, the Orioles, especially on the hitting side, can completely control the rental market. They're better non-rental players who could be moved among other teams. But if teams are looking for that little cheaper option with the rental guys, especially if the D-backs are winning some baseball games, they did lose on Monday night. Let's see, it's kind of day to day with the D-backs right now because they're like right at 500, trying to stay in it. Live D-backs score update, 0-0 in the second. Here as I'm recording at 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. But if the D-backs, they don't sell, or at the very least they keep most of their guys and try and buy, the Orioles have the best 2 rental hitters. Full stop. Laureano, O'Hearn. Starting pitcher-wise, they might have the second best one in Charlie Morton. The O's are going to be in a great spot. Even if the D-backs sell, the O's still have some of the better players out there. But if they don't, this is why I'm saying the Orioles, quite frankly, and Mike Elias, this is going to define his time as Orioles GM. This is going to define his job security. Just like with the draft this year, in which the Orioles had the biggest bonus pool ever. And so far, so good. Like, they've killed it on that draft. If they can get Slater DeBrun signed, like, it'll be a big success to this point. The Orioles controlled that draft with all the money they have. They also now control the deadline with the players they have available, the lack of sellers, because so many teams are on the fringes of being in it in the wild card, don't want to go full sell, and the Orioles are out of it and have so many of these good rental players. They can dictate the prices, and if teams are willing to, they really want these players, the O's can get what they want and make out with a haul and get players who can help them next year and turn things back around. If Elias fails this deadline, he's on the hot seat heading into the offseason, heading into 2026. But if he nails this, he can be back in the good graces, and he has the chance to do it. The Orioles hold all the cards. Will they play the right hand? That is the question we're going to find out in the next week. But we're going to have all this trade deadline stuff covered for you here on the Locked On Orioles podcast. We'll be back tomorrow recapping Game 3 between the Guardians and the Orioles. Zack Efflin returns for the O's. He goes up against Slade Ciccone, the 26-year-old righty with a 3.84 ERA on the season, who had a wild last start against the Athletics. He went 8 1/3 innings, 6 runs, 8 hits, 2 strikeouts, no walks. You don't see a line like that. You haven't seen a line like that since like 1974. So we'll see what he does in another 6:40 start on Masson 2. I'm back tomorrow to recap that one, and we're going to continue to talk deadline. Specifically, we're going to look at the players the Orioles have to trade away. And we're going to look back over the past 4 deadlines or so. And we are going to compare the similar players that were traded then to the players the Orioles can trade now, basically to find out, okay, what if players like this, like Laureano and O'Hearn and Dominguez and Morton, what if players like that been worth at the past couple of deadlines? So what can the Orioles expect to reasonably get back in terms of prospects and players in these trades? That's coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.